I wanted to make a character for a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I'm writing, and I wanted a trapper of a northern snowbound forest. I couldn't find a model that fitted what I wanted or was even anywhere near it. So I decided to attempt a conversion. So this is the one that I bought on eBay, and it's painted, as you can see. And it was worth looking for painted models because they're much cheaper than unpainted ones. And this one is not a brilliant job. Its main problem actually is that it's been abused. It's obviously been in a box with other metal miniatures chinking together, so it's got massive great nicks and chips out of the paintwork, but I don't think the metal is damaged. And the paint job itself was actually reasonable. I mean, the main problem is that it hasn't been finished. It needed some washes and some highlighting. And then, of course, somebody made this absolute horrendous decision with the hair colour. So we've got a so it's just John McEnroe style, but the paint is the paint has made a fundamental mistake, not actually looking at any research material. And I'm not pretending that blonde hair is easy, but the first most basic thing to do is to get a picture in front of you with somebody with blonde hair, and have a look at what colours you really get in there. You certainly don't get that interesting greeny yellow. So I think there's no solution really other than to strip him down. And the way I do that, it's a white metal miniature, of course. The way I strip that is I use like normal household paint stripper, like Nitromors. I've never had any problem with pitting or degradation to the metal using that. It's a case of gloves, safety specs, put it in Nitromors for a few minutes, and then you scrub it very, very carefully, or apron as well, with a toothbrush, being really, really careful that you don't flick the paint stripper because it is quite aggressive. Making sure you don't flick it everywhere, in case, especially if you're doing it in a kitchen. So you need to do it really with great care, and you may need to do that twice. And I'll show you that when it's at that stage. And the base that came with it is quite amusing. Somebody slapped green paint on that base without even bothering to trim off the sprue. Look at that. So that will be chucked away. And I'll use one of these bases, which is the bases I prefer. That's actually a larger size one. I discovered I've run out of smaller size one. But these bases are black to start with, and I like leaving the black flange on my models, and they have a sort of like a recess there, which is a good sort of well on which you can build up some interesting base materials. But he will go. They come in. I think they come in sort of 35mm and 25mm and various other sizes. And this is probably a size larger, so I need to buy some small ones. That will be fine. While I'm working on this, that will be on order. And then I thought about the fur. Now I could have attempted sculpting on the fur with green stuff, or some other modelling compound. But then I had an idea for an experiment. As I was reading an article about making model thatched cottages with teddy bear fur as the thatch. So I thought, well, I wonder if I could actually use some fabric fur to actually make the outfit for this model. It may not work, but that's what the experiment is about. So I bought this stuff. This is just a sample. This also cost me £2. So the outlay on the model so far is £4. which is not bad. And this was long pile fur fabric. I think actually that was excessive. I thought long that'll be good. Just ordinary length would have been fine when you're going down to that scale. But the other thing I liked very much about the model, and why I picked it over other ones that were just archers, is because very often you see them drawing the bowstring. This one is not drawing the bowstring. He's just loosed his arrow and he's reaching for his next one. And I particularly like that because with the ones where they're drawing the bowstring, you've either got to imagine the bowstring and the arrow, or you've got to try and somehow model them on, which is very difficult and fiddly. With this one, because he's obviously reaching for his next arrow, I'm just thinking I don't have to model the next arrow, but I am thinking I can use maybe a strand of the fur, particularly as on this what it's supposed to be, yak fur or something. There are dark strands and light strands, so I could maybe pull a light strand, and I may have a go at modelling the bowstring. So there's our little chap in the paint stripper, the generous glob of it, and it's about 5 minutes, and you can see I make a little container for it out of a little bit of tin foil, and that's the product that I'm using. After 5 minutes, we start scraping away with the toothbrush very, very gently so as not to flick it anywhere, and then rinse, and then dry it off and inspect, and then usually it needs a second go. So here he is after 5 minutes, and you can see from the toothbrush that I discovered he's been done with black undercoat, which is a mistake in my book, even though some quite well-known so-called professional painters do it. I think it makes it very difficult to get bright light colours when you've got to put several layers on to cover a black undercoat. I always undercoat in white. And I haven't rinsed this yet, but it actually looks like it's not going to need a second application. You can't always get every last particle of paint out of the very deepest cracks and crevices, but that doesn't matter. So it's going to be thoroughly rinsed now, and then it's going to be I'm going to make sure I rinse it and scrub it a bit more with another old toothbrush and get a little bit of washing up liquid on it, and then rinse it. Make sure that it's got no grease or residue of the paint stripper on it whatsoever. Some pretty icky stuff, that black undercoat that's come off. So here he is, ready to be sprayed, and he's been washed with a little bit of washing up liquid in the mix, just to make sure there's no grease on it at all, and is then fixed temporarily with blue tack onto this piece of wood with some other models that are waiting to be painted. They are a mixture of some new models and some other ones bought from eBay, which appear to have actually been pre-stripped. So they've all been thoroughly washed to make sure there's no grease at all on them. And then they're fixed down onto that piece of wood with blue tack, which is greasy. So between putting the blobs of blue tack on there and pushing the models into it, I've made sure that I wash my fingertips very carefully again with soapy water. And then if the blue tack needs adjusting to make them stand up properly, they get washed in between each stage. There's no grease at all. I just use ordinary car primer. The piece of wood is there, so I can take them outside. It's January in the Midlands of England, so it's very cold. I put them on that piece of wood. I can take them outside, spray them, turn it around easily, spray the other side, bring it in to dry, and then take it back out for a second coat if it needs it. Primer is fine for that. Hasn't gone all the way into the deepest cracks and crevices of the face, but that doesn't matter. Those areas will be a bit darker anyway. The main thing that the primer does is it provides a key for paint, and in this case for the glue that's going to go on there. So you don't need to overdo the primer. It's been about 5 weeks since I've picked this model up and got distracted onto other projects. That's not a bad thing, gives you thinking time. Come back to it now, and you can see I've just put a bit of base layer of paint on the face and on the bow bits that I know that are going to be uncovered. I'll do more with that at the final painting stage, but for the moment that's just to remind me really of which are the bits that I'm not going to cover in fur. And I don't want my character to really be an elf, just happens to be an elf model, and so I've just added a little bit of extra highlighting down the sides of the face, which in theory should make that face look a tiny bit wider than the stretched narrow face that the sculptor gave it. Here's the fur starting to go on, and I'm using super glue, and notice that I'm building up from the bottom, so I'll put some on, and I'll roughly for the moment cut off the excess, and then I'll put another one. I sort of collecting the fur together in tufts like that, just sticking it on a tuft at a time. This is the main tool I'm using, decoupage scissors, very useful tool. Notice that they make them in pink because they think that only ladies are going to be doing fine work with scissors for some reason. But my toolbox is gender neutral. Here it is coming on. That's only about 2 tiers of clumps of fur stuck on so far, and but a fair old bit of trimming, more trimming than there is sticking down. And I'm using my magnifying glasses there, only old toy ones, but they do a great job for letting me see what I'm doing at close distances. And remember that it's all going to be stuck down with a dilute varnish at a later stage, so the fur won't be as fluffy as that. It'll lie down a lot flatter. He looks especially comical at this stage, but it sort of shows you the process. The pretty much all of that is going to be cut away. It's been glued on with super glue at each stage, and this is just to disguise the John McEnroe haircut and make it look like some sort of a fur hat. I'll snip away virtually all of it, just leave the stumps of each hair where they're glued on, and then I'll be working that into some kind of shape with my watered down varnish and paintbrush. So there he is with the fur sticking stage completed. I'm quite pleased with the effect, and so the experiment continued. I decided I wanted just a little bit more detail to stop him looking like a a woodwose, which is a wild man of the woods. I want him to actually look like a clothed person, so I just tied some cotton around his ankles and his wrist and around his waist there, just to try and give it a little bit of the outfit a little bit more shape and definition. And now I'm going to start adding some diluted varnish to solidify the fur down. I'm really, because the original fake fur is this black and white stuff, I really quite like the colours, so I'm beginning to question whether or not I will actually paint it, or whether or not I'll just keep that black and white look, because it does look quite convincing. So I'm using I usually use Viejo game colour, because it comes in these little bottles which have a dropper, but I couldn't get any today, so I'm having to use Humbrol acrylic matte varnish, and this is a very useful thing to have in your toolkit as a disposable eyedropper thing. I'm using a mixture of, it's about 3 drops of acrylic varnish to 9 drops. So that's 1 to 4 varnish diluted with 3 parts of water. Very difficult to actually do this through the viewfinder of my phone, but that's what I'll be doing. Very thin layer of that, and the reason it's so diluted is because I don't want to I want to stick it all together and make it solid, so it gives me the option to paint it, but I don't want to lose the definition. That's why it's very dilute, and if it's not good enough to do the job, if it doesn't stick the fur down, I can just add another layer, or I can just increase the varnish relative to the water in the mix. And so finally there he is, finished and painted up, ready for adventuring in his snowy northern forest. As an experiment, it's been quite good. He's not perfect. The actual detail of the sculpt, it's the original figure wasn't particularly brilliant. It was only a cheap one, and the face isn't very detailed, so I couldn't do very good eyes, despite several attempts in trying. And I could perhaps have trimmed the fur off even more tightly and more closely. I had a bit of a problem with the rope round the belt, which got hooked around the bottom of the scabbard there, so ended up being loose instead of tight. But it's not bad. It's a technique I would try again, and get a bit better next time. But I'm moderately pleased with it. I'll try and get some decent stills of it.